A wonderful day to all of you, dear parents and learners who are watching us from the comforts of your homes. Also to our committed private school teachers and administrators. To the very dynamic officers and members of BC-APSA, headed by the President, Ma'am Annie Marie Cagiwa. To our invited speaker, Dr. Edizon Fermin. To our key sponsor, Diwa Learning Systems Incorporated. BC-APSA is opening the year 2021 with a treat to all of you to assist you in coping with the new normal of teaching our learners. I believe that after more or less 6 months of blended type of learning, a few of you may have gotten used to this mode of learning. But many of you, our dear parents, have not yet adjusted to this system. This is the reason why we have this web talk today on parents as co-facilitators of learning. With or without COVID-19 pandemic, parents play a vital role in educating the young learners. The parent-teacher relationship and cooperation are significant factors in the learner's quality of learning and self-development. This should not be misconstrued as parents acting as students, wherein they are the ones answering the performance tasks and written works of their children just to get perfect marks or just passing scores. It is not a simple talk, one word is enough communication with the child. It's not even an assistance being showcased by parents on Facebook or Instagram. There is this statement I came across with, and I quote, "At the end of the day, the most overwhelming key to a child's success is the positive involvement of parents." Then what is this positive involvement? It is more of parents playing the role of co-facilitators. Let us learn more about this as we go through this web talk. Sit back, learn much, and enjoy the treat of BC-APSA officers to all of you. This is Gladys Sibayan, the Vice President of BC-APSA for the Junior High School and the Principal of the University of the Cordilleras Integrated School, Grade School, and Junior High School, giving you a very warm welcome to the second Web Talk series of BC-APSA. I wish all of you and your families a prosperous new year. Thank you very much.
Good day to all our viewers, especially the parents and guardians in the private schools. It is my privilege to introduce to you our speaker this day, Dr. Edizon Fermin, Doctor of Philosophy. Dr. Fermin is the founder of EdTalks, a professional development group that focuses on adaptive, innovative, and resilient education. He is currently the Vice President for Academic Affairs of the National Teachers College, which was acquired by Ayala Corporation Education in 2018. He formerly served Miriam College in 2000 to 2018 in various capacities such as Director for Innovation Development, Director for Basic Education, and High School Principal. He holds a bachelor's degree in secondary education, major in English, minor in Filipino as magna cum laude, a master's degree in teaching English as a second language, and a doctoral degree in Filipino language, planning and policy, all from the University of the Philippines in Diliman. He received the UP Gawad Chancellor bilang pinakamahusay na di graduadong mag-aaral ng sektor ng batas at aghang panlipunan in 2000 and the Miriam College President's Awards for Research in 2005 and 2010. In June 2014, he was chosen as the youngest recipient of the Professional Achievement Award of the University of the Philippines College of Education Alumni Association for his scholarly work on evidence-based teaching practices. In 2016, he became the first recipient of the Oscar M. Lopez Award for Transformative Educational Leadership. In 2017, he received the Outstanding Alumnus Award in Basic Education from the Nueva Ecija University of Technology and Science and Technology, where he graduated valedictorian in 1996. A member of the International Honor Societies of Phi Kappa Phi and Pi Gamma Nu, he has written and refereed articles, delivered lectures, and facilitated trainings concerning e-learning, literacy, teacher education, social linguistics, student affairs program development, and curriculum development in various parts of the country and overseas. As a published researcher and national trainer advocating learner-centered outcomes-based education, he has trained teachers and education leaders from the preschool to tertiary levels, and even technical and vocational schools. He continues to work with the British Council and the CHED International Affairs staff in developing policy and practice pathways in transnational and adult education in higher education. He recently completed in 2019 his training in equitable access to education as a scholar of the Asia-Europe Foundation at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. He was a member of the Department of Education's Technical Working Group on the K-12 curriculum as member of the Learning Area Team for Languages, the National Basic Education and Higher Education Commissions of the Catholic Educational Association of the Philippines, or SIA. He is currently co-chair of the Commission on Higher Education's Technical Panel in Teacher Education since 2013 up to the present, and the Chief Consultant of the National Executive Course for Education Leaders, or EXCEL, in Senior High School of the Private Education Assistance Committee since 2017 up to the present through the Fund for Assistance to Private Education, or FAPE. Once again, Dr. Edizon Angeles Fermin.
Isang mapagpala at mapagpalayang araw po sa ating lahat. I am very honored to join you today as we try to understand further the changing landscape not only of education, learning and teaching, but more importantly, parenting. At this time of the pandemic, it is very important for all education stakeholders to understand that we are being offered the opportunity to innovate further this landscape. And we are very thankful that we have with us in our midst an esteemed partner in innovation in education, DIWA Learning Systems Incorporated. This session is jointly managed by EdSpeaks, the group that I founded in terms of transitioning people towards adaptive, innovative, and resilient education. If you would like to have a copy of the post-webinar reading material, I would like you to take a screen cap of the link that you are seeing on the screen right now. We will also be typing this on our chat room so that you can access the link, answer the post-webinar survey, and we will send you a copy of the post-webinar reading material. I think we are now very much ready to begin our journey. No anya ti imulan isuti apitem, and I hope I got that right. What we sow, we reap. Today, we focus on looking at parents as co-animators of learning. In this hour-long engagement, our direction is to appreciate the distinction between parents as co-facilitators and parents as co-animators of learning, especially in view of the current situation of remote education provisions. So take note, my dear friends, we are looking at the distinction between parents as co-facilitators and as co-animators. The second item that we would like to focus on is to acknowledge the distinction of specific routines and habits that foster a supportive and engaging context for parents and their children while learning at home. And last but not the least, it is important for us through this session to anticipate the other challenges that have emerged in coping with the demands of alternative and flexible learning options. And hopefully, in this power hour that we will share together, you will be clarified on four important points that I'd like to make. And so I begin with my first point. You see, the idea that parents are co facilitators of learning is not a good starting point to understand your role in the current scenario. Let me tell you why. Alam po nating lahat na ang pagiging magulang ay isang bagay na mahirap pag-aralan at higit sa lahat pangatawanan. Learning to become a good parent is already a tough challenge. But this current crisis has even made it more challenging for all of us. In fact, what we say right now is it is no longer just our children who are enrolled. In fact, memes have surfaced and we are being told that it seems that the parents are the one who are actually enrolled in the learning process. And what's worse there, or what is extra challenging, is that we are being compelled by the Department of Education and other state agencies to learn how to become a good parent dash teacher. And to me, that's a different story. It is okay to learn how to be a good parent on the one hand, but now we are being challenged to move towards the direction of being nanay, tatay, slash, or dash teacher. This is primarily the reason I tell you that the way to understand the role of parents right now is to focus on the term presence and not just power. I'm sure you're going to ask me, how can I be present in the ongoing learning of my children if I also have to work? But today you will understand that presence is not only meaning physical presence. But a lot of the concept of presence that you will understand today has something to do with mindfulness. And as we say in development studies, presence must translate to mindfulness. For an instance, if you look at the current situation of our children, this is probably what you are currently encountering whenever your children are engaged in some form of remote learning. A lot of these memes have actually made us laugh and actually represent the kind of dispositions that we share right now. We laugh about it, but the truth of the matter is, these are expressions of the challenge brought upon us by this pandemic. And you see, these two strips alone tell you that you have to be there for two things. The first is to actually make sure that you are overseeing what's happening so that secondarily you can come to the aid or assist your children. But research in good parenting tells us that 99.9% of being a good parent is just being present with your child. So that's the physical sense of it. But it also says on the flip side of that, 100% of being happy is just being present. And that's what I'd like to distinguish. What do you mean by being present, especially right now that our kids are depending so much on us in terms of making education work for them? Remember, I was telling you earlier, presence translates to mindfulness. Exactly how this operates is what we are going to find out. Now, on the screen, you are looking at two columns. One is labeled mindful, and the other says mindful. Now, if you're looking at your role as a parent in terms of the left hand side of this table versus the right hand side, you will see that two distinct dispositions are present at the moment. Let's look at the first column and look at it more in depth. So, if you are mindful of five concerns right now, you have the tendency to focus on the items you find on the right. For instance, if you think that your child is going through a lot, your immediate impulse as the caregiver, the primary caregiver to your child, is to make things more bearable and easier. And you will extend a lot of effort to ensure that such kind of ease will be provided. But at the same time, you're thinking about the fact that your child is going through a lot, you admit the fact that you are also going through a lot. You might have lost your job, you might have a different work scheme right now. And so you're feeling that while you are being overwhelmed, you cannot stop the kind of learning engagement that your child should undergo. And that is why you focus on getting the help from other people. We know that there are a lot of electronic and remote tutors and learning assistants who have surfaced recently because of the need for home based education. A third item that you are busy thinking about is the fact that really you can't do the work of the teacher. And so you end up focusing on doing more calls, more chats, more emails with your child's teachers. And on the one hand, this frustrates your child, it frustrates you, and it also frustrates your uh, child's teachers. And most importantly, you are coming from the vantage point that you don't want your child to fail. In fact, no parent here would love that their children would actually fail. And so, what do? Since there are too many temptations and distractions at home, to ensure that you will reach your goal of making your child succeed, you impose what we call quote unquote martial law at home while they are doing remote education. And why should you live with that thinking that your child cannot fail? Because in the circle of friends, of parents that we have, we always are reminded that we cannot be blamed if your children fall short of the expectations. And believe it or not, there are more parents who have surfaced to become helicopter or hovering parents who would like to perfect things in the currently imperfect and distractive scenario. So take note, the mindful parent has a mind full of too many concerns that could have been managed better. And so take note, these types of parents are the ones who are likely going to end up with more frustrations. Bato-bato sa langit, ang tamaan, sana po wag magalit. But there are other parents who responded to the current situation in this manner. We call them the mindful parents. They know for a fact that things are going to be difficult, but instead of focusing on the difficulty, they claim that there is a way to prioritize things better. And that is why they immediately shifted the routines and habits of their children from doing too much of those that apply to school based settings to those that can apply at home. But while they are doing a lot of order setting, they tell themselves that this is going to be tough, this is going to be challenging, but I must find a way to breathe and think. Because if I don't have that space, I will not be able to focus on sharing a sense of self care among my kids. And take note, people who are capable of doing self care can self regulate. And self regulation is a crucial ingredient of agency to learn on your own. And this is important in remote education because if you are not at home and your children will have to learn, your children have to capitalize on their own capabilities. But being so, it doesn't mean that you have to abandon your responsibility to ensure that you are present you are available for your child to learn. And that is why these parents and guardians believe they can learn along with their children. And this means that on top of the things that their teachers or schools would like the children to learn, parents as teachers also serve as models of the love of learning. It doesn't necessarily mean that you show love of learning by doing the your homework of your kids, but more importantly, spending time to learn other things outside of the curriculum that they are dealing with. And largely because of this modeling behavior, parents have the tendency to believe that their children can do things, the can do attitude. And the best way to do this is for you to actually develop a context at home in which children do more than the typical learning tasks or requirements that they have. I know what you're thinking. This might mean that, oh no, sir, so mas marami pa palang dapat gawin ang mga anak namin. Not entirely in that sense, but you need something to balance off the kind of learning that happens through remote education and things that can be learned with you, with your kids at home. Because that's the way you can get through this current difficulty better. And so the last item of a mindful parent is that that parent believes that I and my child will get through all this. And this means that both the parent and the child are clear about the expectations and the vision of going through learning processes, even if they are done remotely. Now, parents, listen carefully. The reason I'm distinguishing between the mindful and the mindful parent is that when you focus on just making things easier, that's when you assert your role as a co facilitator. Facilitation is not bad because it means making things easy. But you and I know that making things easier for our kids doesn't translate exactly to real learning. Minsan nga po, sa sobrang pinapadali na natin ang mga bagay para sa ating mga anak, yun bang tipong tayo na yung sumasagot ng modules o tayo na yung nagtataas ng kamay sa synchronous session, dumadali ang buhay ng anak natin, pero ang tanong ay, natututo ba sila? Admittedly, this question tells us that there is something wrong if we just concentrate on asserting our role as facilitators. But in this session, I tell you, your role has to be that of a co-animator. The teachers and school administrators are trying their best, including myself, because I'm an administrator, to make education alive and give life despite our distance. And parents, more than facilitation, should share the role of animation. That's why animation came from the Latin word anima, which means to give life. It is not the end of regular school life just because we're doing remote education. In fact, it is an invitation to reconfigure the way we look at life giving education. And that is why I showed you the distinction earlier of what a mindful, which is the facilitator parent, and the mindful, or the animator parent. So take a deep breath and take stock of what I said. Maybe it's time for you to think through whether you are just being mindful or mindful of the current situation. I wouldn't blame anyone if at this point they are still mindful. Sobrang dami na nga nang iniisip, baka sumabog na yan. But to those who have already started to accept the fact that, no, I don't have to worry about all these things because there's a way to prioritize, there's a way by which I could engage my child better, then you are on your way to becoming more present and mindful. Which leads me to the second point. Take note, it is our responsibility to co facilitate. But meaningful facilitation of learning begins with enthusing animation. So take note of the adjective. It has to be the type of life giving support that enthuses. And enthuses means nakakaganyak, nakakahawa, nakakapanggilalas dahil makabuluhan ito. There are people who would tell you this is the way you should live life, make things happier, and so on and so forth. But you simply doubt them because you don't see it from them. The vibe is not there. And that is where the metaphor that I have used in my title will come in. What must you sow so that you can reap the benefits of enthusing animation and eventually meaningful facilitation? To begin this segment, I'd like you to look at this image. You see, kids love the context of make believe. And that make believe that I'm showing you right now is imagine you as the parent, the second teacher, knighting or giving power to a young child that, hey, you are my child, you are the chosen one, and I give you the power to explore and eventually love learning despite and in spite of the situation. Of course, there are too many dramatic versions that you could think about, but giving that power to your child to become the owner, the primary responsible person for his or her learning is a very good way of painting what a mindful parent can do. But you see, giving power means also sowing certain seeds among our kids that help them prepare themselves better in this current context. Take note, there is likelihood that the same setup that we have right now will continue on in the next academic year because young children are the last who will are going to be the last people who will receive the vaccine. And so the likelihood of resuming with face to face classes is still low at the moment. And so we need to prepare ourselves further into empowering our children to ensure that they can continue learning on their own. So, what's the first thing that you must sow? I would say, from the vantage point of an education and development specialist, sow the seed of order through negotiated routines and habits. You see, this is the pitfall of many parents and even teachers that the routines and habits they just dictate without actually engaging the learner into crafting the rules that will make learning at home really something they can own and manage. And so in the many instances that I have trained parents because of the pandemic, I always tell them that part of the negotiated routines and habits is to communicate with your child what are the things that can help them really make the situation bearable. So, in one school that I have worked with, what we created was, of course, the parents were saying, Sir, kailangan po ng kamay na bakal para noon talagang mabalanse ang pag-aaral, paglalaro, pagtulog, pagkain ng mga bata. Okay, but when I asked them, did you ask the kids if that's okay? They said it's okay. But you need to couch the language of the new habits and routines in the way the children will understand them. And you know better that children respond well to instructions. So look at what this school did. They encourage all children, and of course the parents and the guardians, to translate the daily routines into 6 steps labeled as Bakal P, where B stands for bangon na, ayos na, kain na, aral na, laro muna, pahinga muna. And what the school did was to ask each child to create their own schedule. What time will you wake up? What are you going to fix after waking up? What time should you eat? What time should you engage in learning? If it's synchronous sessions, you must be mindful that these are the periods during the day when you will actually study. And then you have time to play and recreate. And of course, there must be that provision of rest. Kung ako po ang tatanungin nyo, Actually, masarap mag-aral sa panahon na 'to kung tama ang mga routines and habits. Because sometimes, if your study area is just near your bed, your tendency is to be charmed by the bed more than your study desk. You know what I mean. And so, when these negotiated habits and routines were explained to children further, they now have better appreciation that ang aking bagong silid-aralan ay ang aking bahay-aralan. And in which case, I need to strike the balance between things that I can do for my home, my parents and my siblings, and of course, what I can do to make the burden or the transition more manageable for everyone. And eventually, you and I know that if you're able to teach kids these responsibilities, self-reliance and a sense of otherness will become their uh, immediate gains. And you see, these gains form part of the discourse of lifelong learning. The second thing that I encourage you to sow is to sow the seed of self care that yields balance, peace, and happiness. You know, ang pag-aalaga po sa ating mga sarili ay hindi natin dapat pinipigilan, lalo na at ito ay kabahagi ng pangkalahatang konsepto ng well-being or wellness. So, if you are already at the state when you are having a lot of frustrations, as the principal manager of learning at home, remember that you must find time for you to breathe. If you are looking at the screen right now, here is what a 30-day calendar of self-care looks like for a parent who's already doing a lot of things for their children and are making sure that the economic status of the family is really safe and sound. Self-care can be as simple as a 15-minute walk, or you could unfollow social media accounts. Actually, that's very therapeutic, if you ask me. And the goal of demonstrating this self-care not only helps you perform your work as an animator of learning and living at home, but more importantly, you know that when kids ask you, Mommy, why are you listening to music every evening after we study? And then you tell them, that's because mommy also loves herself. And by loving herself, she could love you more. And in which case, the assumption that these good habits will be picked up by children will likely happen. And it's true. Eventually, you can teach your kids to do self care as well, even if they are still young and are actually adjusting to the many issues and concerns raised by the current situation. So that's important. Remember, self care can be enjoyed and at the same time modeled. The third is to sow the seed of the love for learning. You see, the genuine love for learning eventually impacts on the capability of each learner to facilitate his or her own learning. The love for learning translates to enthusiasm, interest, and deep regard for new things that they can learn. And so it follows that more than attending to the lessons of your children, you have to engage your children in maximizing some portion of your daily or weekly schedule to do the things that you are passionate about as a parent or as an adult. Remember, it doesn't mean that you're an adult, you stop from learning. For example, the photo that you're seeing on the screen, here's a dad who's so passionate about engines, cars, and so on and so forth. If you can find time to actually engage your daughter or your son to be your little engineering assistant. That can actually trigger a sense of passion building as the children see it in you. And that is why I always believe that parents can lend that important modeling behavior to these children and tell them that yes, you have to focus on math, on science, on English, Filipino, social studies, but hey, anak, That's not all that matters. You must also discover the kind of passion that you have. Is it music? Is it dance? I don't care kung isang Sabado, maghapon na siya nagti-TikTok dahil nag-upload na siya ng kanyang sarili niyang kanta, sayaw, and so on and so forth. For as long as it nurtures the inquisitiveness and creativity of your children, that's their pathway towards building passion. The next item that you have to sow, given the situation, is to sow the seed of fun learning together. Now, this is very fun, I tell you. Aside from sharing your passions with your children, do what I call as important home challenges. These are periods when you, your children, your spouse, and the other members of the family can really stop first doing whatever is connected to the traditional educational sense of remote learning. But this time you tell them, okay, this Saturday, after you finish your homework, we are going to do a cook off. And in the cook off, we only have 5 ingredients. And when Papa decides who has the best recipe, he or she or they can get a certain prize. So these fun family challenges may not be too complicated. It's as simple as finding out how your children make sense of kitchen work, how to bake things, or probably a craft that everyone in the family can do. I remember when I was young, our most important family challenge every Sunday is for us to beat our mom or our dad over with a game of Scrabble. And you see, uh, probably that's the reason my siblings and I eventually had this knack of wordsmithing because we were very much exposed to a family challenge of trying to learn as many words as we can using Scrabble. So take note, there's a variety of these options that you have. The next and the last one that I want to share so that you could transition to animating your house as a place for learning is to sow the seed of good visioning. And good visioning is crucial in the way we should understand learning processes. Vision dictates the kind of outcomes and objectives you want to work on. But in the context of the pandemic right now, the best part of the visioning process is that everyone in the family is present to hear about and listen to the kind of aspirations that you have. Even if you are just spending merienda or a meal together, when you start talking about, so, anak, what do you think would you like to see at the end of the school year? Would you like to see good grades? Would you like to see or meet new classmates, even if it's online? You know, these things are important of the visioning process for children. And this is why I'm very glad that DIWA Learning Systems put this in your program today because you are now in the middle of what we call the experimentation year for remote learning. And as early as now, you should be thinking how you should train yourself as a parent or as a teacher to impact on the kind of vision setting that your children, your students can do for the next academic year. So take note, when you saw these things, you will likely animate the desire to learn and eventually the learning process itself. However, when parents and guardians have already reached the stage of co-animating with educators, the kind of learning that should take place at home, what must you bear in mind to make the process of co-animation really work? Pardon me, but I'm going to use what DIWA Learning Systems is actually making use of right now as its campaign. It is entitled 5G. 5G for the DIWA Learning Group is actually representative of fifth generation or the fifth generation learning philosophy, learning resources, learning techniques, and whatnot. And their call to animate education through DIWA 5G means that we understand how different are the intergenerational requirements for learning. We say that first-gen learning means something like this. Naniniwala ang nanay at tatay na lahat ng bagay na sasabihin ni teacher ay mabuti. Kaya po sabi dyan, anak, makinig ka kay nanay at tatay more than the teacher, no? So that's the first generation perspective. Our parents are our first teachers. But in the second generation, you will see here, the parents saying, makinig ka kay teacher, tapos kwento mo sa amin, anak. This is because second generation education means pareho nang nagtatrabaho yung magulang, wala nang naiiwan to supervise the learning process. And so what happens is you just ask the kids to tell you what the teacher told them during the day. And over dinner, they talk about what was learned. Third generation education is something similar to this expression. Makinig tayo kay teacher ng mabuti, anak. After the second generation parents felt that mukhang nagkulang kami ng presence, maybe we should also spend time learning along with our kids. That's third gen. Now, fourth gen is different. You now have more assertive parents who are saying that they should be doing something better so that the kids can learn better. Hence the expression, teacher, makinig din kasi kayo sa amin. And we always say that the fourth generation parents are the helicopter parents. They are the ones who are constantly hovering over the classroom, over the kids. In fact, they even spend hours and hours on school to find out what their kids are doing. And this causes a lot of stress upon teachers because they feel that they cannot be trusted by the parents. But anyway, you cannot blame the parents because that's a parenting style. But the fifth generation education, which Diwa is mindful of, is something very special. Because here, the one asserting more is the child. Hence the expression, Nay, Tay, teacher, makinig kayo sa akin. This is what I really need. Now, this is a very powerful statement because fifth generation learners are the ones who can have greater control over their learning process. For as long as you give them the resource, you give them the routine, you give them the habit, and they are clear on the kind of rewards that they will get sooner or later, they are likely going to manifest better learning outcomes. But for you to be guided, what the DIWA 5G approach is in co-animating learning, I'd like you to remember exactly 5Gs. So, learner-centered animation through DIWA 5G consists of 5 verbs. And these are imperatives. Mga utos po ito. The first G is grasp. The second is grant. The third is guide. The fourth is gamify. And the fifth is gratify. So, ulitin nga po natin. Grasp, grant, guide, gamify, gratify. Very easy to remember, and I hope that in the next few minutes, I can guide you how to perform each step. So remember, you have to follow this in a form of a sequence. So you cannot jump to gamify without providing guidance. So it's one step at a time. So let's begin with the word grasp. What do you need to grasp? Even in pre-pandemic times, we, the teachers and educators of your young children, believe that every child has a particular level of smartness. There are people who are smarter by listening to music or looking at pictures or letting them talk about themselves or talk about others or use more words or use more numbers or learn better in nature or learn in the confines of their own rooms. This is the theory of multiple intelligences first proposed by Howard Gardner of Harvard University. Eventually, when the rest of the world of education theorists picked up from this theory, they believe that if you identify the smartness of your kid upon observation, you should build upon that. You should capitalize on that as the primary basis of setting up learning experiences. Now, this is problematic for schools because if you have 40 students, that would mean that your child's teacher must be able to know what is Bob very likely to be uh, smart on or quite confident with. What does Ed? What does Elaine? What does Marie? What does Joel? What are those intelligences that they have? So I suggest that given your experience over the last two learning quarters, or three maybe for some schools, recall, my dear parents, guardians, and teachers, notice the habits of your kids in terms of learning because you need to build upon that. That is the reason that I would strongly recommend that based on what you have seen as the greater strength of your kid, be present and feed their minds relative to that level of intelligence or smartness. Kaya nga po, sa Filipino, lagi kong sinasabi, so imposibleng magkaroon ng estudyanteng bobo. In fact, nakakabobo pag sinasabi natin na may estudyanteng bobo. At yung nagsasabi nun, pwede ko ring sabihin na isang bobo. Dahil sabi po sa teoryang ito, everyone has certain degrees of being smart. But you see, once you grasp it, you need to, it says here, grant the context in which that smartness can be nurtured. Di ba nga po sabi ng isang sikat na infant formula, nurture the gift within. Oh, alam niyo ba kung ano yung gatas na yon? Kasi po doon ako lumaki sa gatas na yon. When you nurture the giftedness or the smartness of that kid by creating adequate conditions at home to support their smartness, you will likely hit the chord of excitement for the child. So I clipped this photo of my colleague based in the US who have three kids who are now learning from home. What they did was to convert half of their children's bedroom into their remote learning classroom. But you see, one of their kids is heavily inclined to music. So instead of putting what's this, a regular study desk, what they did was to transfer their piano and made that the nook of the student so that their philosophy was um, if my child gets bored with their ongoing lesson, at least he or she could play music that can revive his or her interest. If I did not clip this, the farther right will show you a very athletic nook because the other child is into sports. That's why you see a basketball there. While the daughter, on the other hand, is very artsy. She's into drawing and painting, and that's what you will find in the other nook. And through this, the child is being encouraged that, yes, my mom and dad would like me to continue studying, even remotely, but they care about my passion, the source of my smartness. And that actually grants a lot of opportunity to grow on the part of the child. Now, not only should you provide the space or the condition to support your kind's smartness, you must also make it a point that there are guidelines that you will need to develop with them. Remember, reasonable routines and habits. And that's why, again, in the case of the school I was referring to earlier, I gave them pointers on how to discuss things with children once you grant their requests or grant the things that make them happy. That space for learning, sakto lang po ha, maliit, wag malaki. Sapat ang liwanag, ligtas, malayo sa ingay and other distractions, and of course, linis. Liit, liwanag, ligtas, layo, linis. If you're thinking about connecting the smartness of your kid in the physical space where they will need to learn. But also, you need to grant them responsibilities, especially if your child will have to learn with other children or people at home. So, for example, in that same school that consulted me about this, I taught them that kung may kapatid o iba pang kasama sa bahay, dagdagan ng tatlong S ang routines. That means to say, sakto lang. Sapat na oras, sapat na panahon in using the space, share the space, at may sariling sinop. You see, these things, once kids understand, they will carry it with them as a gatekeeping device that if I do not attend to these, then whatever has been granted to me might be taken away from me. And the last three requirements that I teach parents and their children, magkasundo po kayo sa tatlong P, which stands for pagsisinop, pag-aayos, paglilinis. And you know, these three are seemingly synonymous, but they are entirely different. Sinop, pag inabutan mo na malinis, walang kalat, sinupin ang lahat pagkatapos gamitin at iwanan siya ng ganon kasinop. Pag-aayos is to sort. This belongs to this, and this is where it goes. And paglilinis, tidying up. You cannot leave that spot with something close to the definition of litter or trash. When all these things are in place, you can now shift the focus of children towards the third G, which is to guide them. You must establish the rhythm with your children to confer with them on their targets and why they are really important. And what do we mean by setting the targets? This is when you can introduce your child to creating their own plans of learning. Remember po earlier I told you there are ways to manage the time of children at home. You could set clear structures such as the ones that you're seeing on the screen. But when you talk about their more granular and focused goals per subject, that is a function of guidance. You need to let the children articulate and write about their goals because at this point, you're teaching them that a goal without a plan is just a wish. And more importantly, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. As early as now, my dear parents, teach these kids what we learned together when we were already adults. That's why their generation will likely become a better generation than ours. And because they are setting goals, you also have to explicitly teach them what if they fail in following their plan, and even if they follow the plan, they ended up with poor grades or below par expectations. Then you also have to confer with them or clarify with them that, anak, don't let one bad grade define your abilities because it is considered a setback. Konting bump lang yan. And how you choose to overcome it is what sets you apart from the rest. Di ba nga po? Sabi ng kanta, di ba tayo'y tao lamang na nadadarang at natutukso rin. And when that happens, the decisions and actions we make after the point of frailty or weakness will become our opportunity to rise to the occasion and become better people. So, when you have given them enough guidance to plan on how they will engage in learning, this is the time you gamify. And that's the reason among the DIWA 5G products and services, you will find out a lot of gamified versions of learning that are very exciting for our children. That's why if your school is a subscriber to Genio, learning management content system of DIWA, you will find that gamification, which means translating learning activities into fun games, will engage learners better. Lalo na po ngayon na remote learning ang condition natin. Now, why is gamifying important? You see, kids love a sense of gamification. Malaro yan eh. So, if you capitalize on that characteristic, you will set them on fire with their targets. And let me share with you how I was able to teach one of my nieces to do this with her kids. So, everyone, all four kids are now doing remote learning, and what they have done is to make some categories of tasks that their children will have to accomplish every day. And every time that they are able to accomplish that and show them to their parents, they get a point. This is how it looks like. So the parents created what they call a dashboard. So the Team de la Cruz dashboard. Apat ang mahahalagang goals na naset ng parents nila dun sa apat na anak. Dapat sa araw-araw, meron kayong share sa gawaing bahay, pero gusto kong makita kung paano nyo sisinupin yung kwarto nyo kasi nandun yung bedroom at saka yung study area nila, no? Tapos, gano'n nyo natatapos yung homework nyo sa mga teachers nyo? That's aral. And buhay, this is fun. Buhay will be add-on points. If the mom or the dad or the lolo or the lola and the kasambahay found out that, let's say, Jello, one of the pamangkins, did something good, he or she gets an additional point. And if you finish all your homework, that's X number of points as well. And what happens is they put on the ref the tally, the dashboard. So the one with the highest accumulated points at the end of the week gets a prize. So makikita nila yan every day. Nagdadagdag ng points. And what's important here is that because there is a probability that you will reach a certain level of threshold scores, kapag na-reach nila yon, meron pang group prize. And I think this is the way to gamify and to engage learners in making learning more fun at home, and at the same time, an opportunity to manage the kind of relationship between the parent as a co-animator of learning, and more importantly, eventually, as a facilitator. Now, take note, the gamification of learning must naturally end with gratifying. What does that mean? Kids hate broken promises. Kayo nga na adults pag pinangakuan kayo ng asawa nyo, nabibilan kayo ng ganito, tapos hindi nagawa, galit na galit kayo. More so with the kids. So when you tell them that when you reach these goals, you will get a prize, make sure they get the prize. And the prizes, that's where a lot of creativity on the part of the parents could come in. Here is an example. If you earn 5 points, that's equivalent to 5 tickets that the students can actually nominate what they want to do with the 5 tickets. You can make a yummy treat, stay up late, dance party time at home, and so on and so forth. So you also engage them in identifying what will give them a sense of gratification. This is important because just like a grade, which translates to happiness on your part, this is the more ulterior and very important message that there is a prize at the end of every hard work. And take note, this adds up to the lifelong learning skill of becoming patient and persistent with your work. So, my dear parents, guardians, teachers, and school administrators, know that your kids cannot be gratified by grades alone and your affirmation, but what they get in the process of you animating the learning process. But I know it is going to be tiring at times. So, when learning co-animation fatigue happens, what are you gonna do? I'm warning you, this is gonna be tiring, this is gonna be challenging, but once you do it well, you are generating and preparing a generation of learners who are far better than who we are right now. And that will create a different impact on society and the whole universe. I mean, to exaggerate about it, that's how I see it. So remember, when learning co-animation fatigue happens, remember APSA. Not that I want you to remember the organization who thought so well about what you need right now. That's why we have this wonderful event today. Remember APSA because it stands for four important wellness initiatives so that every parent, every guardian can bring back themselves to an appreciation that kahit mahirap, dapat tuloy-tuloy lang. So what does A stand for? Acknowledge that you are tired and weary. Wag na wag niyo pong sosolohin yung idea na nakakapagod din yung ginagawa niyo. You know what? In the case of my team at NTC, we actually spend every day some time at the end to tell each other what made you felt tired or weary. Because as their leader, as their tito or tatay, I need to be sensitive enough what I can do for them. Acknowledging that we are tired and weary is acknowledging that we are alive. And that's important because you cannot always just put up a smile when in fact you are dying inside. Sabi nga po ng kanta. But you see, don't just sulk in the sadness of things. From acknowledgement, you must really pause and ponder, look yourself in the mirror, and try to understand what has caused your fatigue. Baka sobra naman na yung monitoring nyo ng homework ng bata. Baka naman dapat bawasan nyo ng konti. O kaya, baka sobrang higpit nyo, ayaw nyo man lang patakbuhin sa veranda yung bata kung may time naman to do it. You see, these things are sometimes very small, yet they rob us of the opportunity to become happier. And I want you to be mindful of that. And sometimes it is causing you a fatigue when you constantly bother your child's teacher. Teacher, tama ba to? Teacher, tama ba to? Teacher, tama ba to? You know, it's good, but once you do it over and above what is minimal, that will cause your fatigue. And once you become aware of them, list them down. Isulat niyo po. Nakaka-stress yung principal kasi tinatawagan ko siya ng 11 in the morning. O baka para hindi ka ma-stress dun sa principal, tawagan mo ng 1 in the afternoon. That's the function of pausing and pondering. Because eventually, that will lead you to sorting things out with the kids and significant others. Your husband, the kasambahay, the principal, the supervisor, the teacher. It is, remember, an entire ecosystem of people helping your child. Hindi naman kayo dapat mag-isa. But the feeling of being alone is sometimes inevitable. And when you realize that you cannot do it on your own, the most logical thing that you need to do is to tell your kids first and foremost. Do you know that studies have shown that when parents tell their children how vulnerable and how broken they are, kids develop empathy and they themselves respond responsively and responsibly. They become more responsible of their actions because they don't want mama or papa to become more lonely. And you know, that's important. Kasama niyo naman yung mga bata in this process. And last but not the least, when you are able to sort things out with your kids and the other people around them, that's when you could agree on new terms and targets for the good of everyone. And I think that's the function of an iterative process of growing together with your kids. It's been 58 minutes since we have started talking about what we can do to become co-animators of the learning process. Remember that the idea that parents are co-facilitators of learning is not a good starting point because you will end up focusing on becoming more mindful. You will assert that you need to facilitate everything and make things easier. But the fact of the matter is that facilitation begins with animation. Remember, my dear parents, it's not bad to make things easy, but you have to give life to things more than anything else. And once that life is sustained through the careful selection of processes of co-animation, you will learn how to grasp, grant, guide, gamify, and gratify, which can make a huge difference in the life of our ever inquisitive children. And when learning co-animation fatigue strikes, just remember that you have 4 steps to go through that will enhance your faith, strength, and courage. And if all else fails, send a message to the APSA president or the APSA officials. Tell them maybe we should gather again for a part 2 of the training of parents and guardians. And that's when you can actually share your insights and experiences so that you will understand that indeed, mahirap maging magulang, lalo na ngayon, totoo naman yan, pero alam niyo po, mas mahirap maging anak at estudyante ngayon. And it is precisely because you are starting more fire as we learn and parent one another in the new normal. And what do I mean by the word fire? Because of all these transitions, we are technically increasing in our level of faith with each other because our intimacy is also being challenged, but that intimacy translates to respecting our spaces and capacities for learning, and more importantly, empathize with one another. And when we are able to sustain this fire, more likely the new and better normal for all of us is going to be exciting. And DIWA Learning Systems and EdSpeaks and the Association of Private Schools Administrators here in Baguio City will definitely be here to continue providing you with relevant knowledge, skills, and attitudes. I will be sending over an important set of reading materials to parents, guardians, and educators if you answer our post-webinar survey using the link that you're seeing on the screen right now. But for the meantime, I'd like to congratulate all of you for making sure that this opportunity to connect today will go a long way in changing and touching the lives of our children, their classmates, and more importantly, you, my parents, guardians, and educators. Malayo-layo na po ang narating natin sanhi ng pandemyang ito at sana ipagpatuloy natin ang pagbibigay ng inspirasyon sa isa't isa para masabi natin sa ating pagtanda noong panahon ng pandemya, mas nadama ko kung paano maging isang higit na makabuluhan at mapagmahal na magulang at guro sa aking mga anak. Thank you so much everyone, and I hope to see you again in one of our future training sessions for parents, guardians, and educators. Once again, my deepest thanks to DIWA Learning Systems for facilitating this opportunity to learn from one another. Hanggang sa muli, paalam!
On behalf of the Baguio City Association of Private School Administrators, we are truly grateful for the wisdom of Dr. Ed Fermin. He is indeed a blessing to the Philippine society and to the world. He has enlightened us on how parents and guardians can assist the learning of the children. We gained the knowledge on how to face the new challenges that have emerged in coping with the demands of alternative and flexible learning options. At this time of pandemic, teaching learning process of the children are facilitated and animated by both parents and teachers. Therefore, there is a need to strengthen the home-school partnership. Dr. Fermin has shared insights that ignited our passion to be of service to the children of today. His insights have given meaning to our being parents and guardians of these children. May his tribe increase. It would be good then to journal your insights and reflect on how you can work out your parenting styles and include in your journal what happened in the implementation of your parenting styles. The second part of this talk, as suggested by Dr. Fermin, will be under the care of your respective school administrators. To all the school administrators, may we request you to schedule a virtual sharing session for the parents and guardians in your school. May we also thank Diwa Learning Systems for sponsoring this web talk. To my co-officers and members of Baguio City Association of Private School Administrators, thank you for your unending support to our activities. Special thanks to Ms. Charis Go of Berkeley School and the business manager of BC-APSA for the technological aspect of this web talk. Thank you too to our Vice Presidents, Ms. Gladys Sibayan of UC Lab, Mr. Marlon Agaga of St. Joseph de Mary, Mr. Alejandro Paglico of SLU Laboratory Elementary School. To our Secretary, Dr. Marilyn Balmeo of St. Louis University Laboratory High School. Our Treasurer, Ms. Nancy Culayan of Victory Baptist Academy. The Auditor, Ms. Jocelyn Tugaong of Metropolitan Baguio Christian Academy. The PRO, Mrs. Karen Gampon of Calvary Ministries Academy. And the another business manager, Pastor Romeo Valiente of Grace Bible Academy. To all our private school administrators, thank you for bringing this news to the parents and guardians in your respective school. This is our contribution for the betterment of our beloved city. May our ever-loving God continue to guide us in everything we do for the common good of our society. Mabuhay ang mga magulang at tagapangalaga ng mga bata sa ating lungsod ng Baguio. God bless us all. This is Mrs. Annie Marie Cagiwa, the Assistant School Directress of St. Louis School Incorporated Center and the President of BC-APSA.